Welcome, everyone. I'm Dana Peever, decision expert, author, speaker, and podcast host. You're listening to the Wildly Courageous Women podcast. More women than ever are faced with challenging decisions on a regular basis. I am so privileged to sit down with them to discuss exactly what they've gone through and how they've come out the other side, realizing their wildest dreams. I'm sure you'll be able to relate. And don't forget to stay to the end to take advantage of my latest free gift. Let's get started. Hello, you wildly courageous women, you. Welcome to the Wildly Courageous Women podcast. I'm Dana Peever, decision expert. And as always, we're here talking about decisions that have been made in our lives that were courageous or impactful or changed the course of our life, or even one that we wish we could go back on. Each week, I join you twice, once with a guest and once solo. Today, I'll be sharing an impactful decision that I've made in my life. Since I've been studying the science of decision-making for over 30 years, the majority of my life's decisions have been made very intentionally using my 5-step Decision Smith system and app. I'll walk you through all of my thoughts behind the scenes today, but before we get started, I want to remind you to stay tuned to the end to get my latest freebie. All right, we're going to take this step by step, and I want to let you know that my talk today could potentially draw some emotion, especially from me. I'm going to share with you something that I have been going through for the past few weeks and the decisions that lay in front of me and what wound up happening around those decisions. So first of all, the topic today is essentially when to leave a relationship and why it can be so hard to pull that trigger. I've been doing a lot of soul searching lately, and I've landed on some great personal epiphanies that are just propelling me forward. But those epiphanies don't necessarily come without a little bit of pain and sadness associated with them. So I'm going to take you back a little bit because I don't know that I've shared a lot of my history with my marriage and my relationships since then. So I'll just top line it for you. And the reason I say that is I have 2 more books coming out in the next year. So first of all, if you're not familiar with the books that I've solo authored already, I've got one book called The Decision to Purge the Year the Skeletons Fell Out of the Closet. And that book is really about boundary setting and making the decisions around that for a variety of my clients. And then a book that I launched earlier this year was called The Decision to Live, the Year She Wiped the Fog Off the Mirror. And that was really a book about the year when I was turning 50. I woke up January 1st to December 31st that year and put myself first every single day. And it's about the journey that I went on and the 107 things on my bucket list that I checked off that year and the impact that year had on me. Following that book, and this coming November, I'll be launching The Decision to Leave, the Year She Found the Courage to Admit the Truth. And that is a book about my decision to leave my marriage and leave someone that I'd been with for 28 years. And so I'll top line that here during this podcast. But if you're interested in hearing all the behind the scenes and the whole story, it will be available on November 28th, 2023. And then the next book that I've got in the works right now is The Decision to Love. And that's going to be a book about all my dating shenanigans and some of the relationships that have gotten me to the place where I am today. And really, it'll be a book about the decision to love myself first, instead of needing to find that validation externally. So those are my books. That's what's coming. So from a decision to leave and a decision to love perspective, we'll touch on a few of the stories briefly today. So let me go back to my marriage. We had a great relationship. We were relationship goals. We just worked really well together. We had great kids, kind of the white picket fence, life was good. But there was always something missing. And this is really personal, but it was in the bedroom. And it wasn't as big of an issue while the kids were growing up as it became as they got older. And, it was something that we talked about frequently and tried many things to work through. And it just got to a point where I didn't have any energy left to try to continue to make it work. And ultimately, the conversation we had back in 2018 was, if you want me to stay in this marriage, you're expecting me to live a life of mediocrity. And I don't think that's fair to ask of me. It still took us, a few years to untangle and make those final decisions. And, interestingly enough, in that particular circumstance, it was his actions that finally made me pull the trigger. It wasn't anything that I did or that I thought about or that I planned. There were some particular things that transpired that showed me his true character, and were kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, or the trigger for me to take action. So in that circumstance, I don't think I was fully ready to make that decision. And it's kind of ironic, being a decision expert, I feel like one of the hardest places to make decisions is when you're in a relationship. And parts of that relationship are still serving you. Again, it's a lot about boundary setting and what you're willing to accept and put up with. And that's not to say that I threw my marriage away. Like I said, we were together for almost 28 years. I feel like the relationship in and of itself was a success. There are times when I potentially feel regret, but then I remember, the two beautiful children that we have together. And I always say, I hit the jackpot when it comes to my kids, and you can't take that away from me. So when I start feeling angry or upset about my failed marriage, I quickly turn that around to remember that my kids are a result of that, and they're just the best. So that brings me back to center. So I'm so happy and fortunate for that. And after my marriage, I found myself in a relationship with an incredible man. And he taught me a lot about who I was, where my insecurities were, what I deserved. He taught me a lot about boundaries. I think one of the things that was really key during that relationship was that he made me feel desirable. He made me feel like I was attractive, and that he enjoyed expressing his love for me intimately, which was something that had been missing for 28 years. And, in looking back, it's really, it was really pivotal and key for me to realize that I felt very inadequate as a feminine being, because I never got that validation from my ex-husband. And so to get it, and then to feel like ultimately I deserved it, was, something that was very impactful for me, and helped me determine, some of the non-negotiables that I would have in a relationship moving forward. As that intimate relationship was coming to a close, we both knew it, we both acknowledged it, but again, I couldn't pull the trigger, and he wound up doing that. And I was devastated. I think I cried for 3 weeks solid. Anytime somebody mentioned his name, anytime anybody asked me how I was doing, I was a wreck. And, I questioned why I was so upset about a relationship that had lasted 3.5 years, when I hadn't felt close to those depths of despair as my marriage was ending. And in hindsight, I recognized that I had probably talked myself out of my marriage over at least a 10-year span. So it wasn't, an immediate cutoff, or it wasn't something that was not expected. And I had the time to grieve that relationship over the course of all of those years when it was not serving me anymore. With the relationship just after the end of my marriage, I knew that it was coming to a close, but I didn't expect to hear those words. And when I sat back to dissect why I was so hurt, in so much pain, experiencing so much sadness about that, I realized that, he had given me so much validation in areas that I felt inadequate and where I lacked confidence, that I wasn't sure I would get that again. And I was afraid to lose that now that I had it. So we had untangled for all of 9 days when I met someone new. And right from the get-go, I knew and I expressed that this new relationship would not be long-term. And I never wavered on that.
There were a lot of differences in our lives that I knew long term wouldn't work. So, I even wonder why I entertained it to begin with. But I go back to that validation that I had been missing and seeking. And he loved every inch of me, for lack of a better description. And he loved every inch of me, every minute we were together. And we were together a lot. At one point, he was sleeping here probably 6 nights a week. And I loved it. And I didn't want to give that up. At the same time, I was very clear about it being not a long-term solution. I was very clear about him not getting all of me. I even went so far as to tell him that I loved him, but I was not in love with him. And I knew he needed that. And I know, he asked me on a regular basis to marry him. And we just come from two such different worlds that it just wouldn't work. But for the time we were together, so, more than a year, he continued to provide me with that validation that I still craved so much. And he did it better than anyone ever has. And I think the hard part is that I don't really know if anyone will ever be able to meet that level again. I can hope, but that's what made what we had so special. People on the outside looking in don't get it, but it's not for them to get. We had something between us that nobody can take away. And he did so many things for me that I needed and didn't necessarily know I needed, that I'll love him dearly forever. But, the fact that I didn't dote on him and love him with all my heart really weighed on him. And there were a lot of things that drove me crazy about him. And I knew it was in both of our best interests to go our separate ways. But again, I couldn't pull that trigger because I was still so comfortable in what validation I was getting from him that I didn't want to give that up. So he made that choice. And I can't say I was blindsided, but it was, and I don't know in hindsight why it was a shock or why it was so surprising based on all the, honest conversations we'd had. But as he moved on, I was another wreck. I spent almost the same amount of time in tears. And I remember it was just probably 2 weeks ago where I finally said, oh my goodness, I've cried my last tears. And obviously I haven't, because here I am again. But at least I've come to acknowledge that, it did have to end, and we're both going to be better off because of it. But again, it wasn't something that I could pull the trigger on. This has really been a time of learning for me, and I appreciate it. And I'm, really respecting the process. And I'll tell you, I went on a date not too long ago with a man who was incredible. I got in his car, and I think we were on our second or third outing for the night. And I sat in his car and I said to myself, this is home. This is what I've been waiting for my entire life. And it was in that moment that I realized, what I deserved. And I could see it plainly and clearly in front of me. Just a quick recap of probably the best date I've ever been on. He's a member at a winery, and we started by going to the winery and having a private sommelier in a room. And we got, I don't know how many wines we tested, like 8 or 10, and had a great time laughing and joking. And keep in mind, this is the first time I've met this guy, and we had only started talking 24 hours earlier, by text. I didn't talk to him for the first time till that given day. And after we left the winery, we went to a golf and country club, and we sat on the patio where there was live music on the water, and had some dinner. And he sat beside me during dinner instead of across from me because it was a little bit loud and he wanted to be able to chat. And from there, we went to another bar, an Irish pub that had live music, and we had a drink there. And then we went to another bar that had a live band and a minuscule dance floor, but we danced the entire night. I've never been with a man who likes to dance except when I was in high school, and I freaking love to dance. So to have someone, a partner who loved to do that too, he really, really showcased for me that the person that I want to be with is still out there. Now, I wish I had a happy ending to that story, but I don't. Our values aren't quite aligned at this point in our lives. But what it did for me was just open my eyes to what is actually out there and gave me hope. I've recently been doing some more work on understanding what my non-negotiables are. And one of my friends put it in such a way that was really impactful. So you can write a list of non-negotiables, in terms of what you're looking for in a partner. And you can write a list of negotiables. But the way she had me write the list of non-negotiables was by stating, I require, and then making that list. And when you say those words, for me, you guys know I'm confident, I'm outgoing, I'm extroverted, I love life, I grab the bull by the horns, I'm honest, I don't have any problem getting what I think I deserve. But what that particular label did for me, I require, is it made me question why I deserved someone that matched my list of non-negotiables. So that's what I've been working through for the past week or so. It's a process, but I'm really going to stop now and be very intentional in the decisions I make to move forward. I recognize that the last 2 relationships that I had, I was in them because I needed to be validated for what I never was validated for in my marriage. And again, I love and appreciate both those men and always will. And I thank them for the growth and the patience. But moving forward, I have a bar set, and my boundaries won't be flexible because I deserve what I require. So all that to say that there have been times in my recent relationships where I haven't pulled the trigger, where I haven't been able to take the steps forward to do what I knew needed to be done. But as in some decisions where, not making a decision is a decision, and when someone else pulls the trigger and makes that decision for you, it's essentially taken out of your hands. I think these circumstances showcase that I knew that's the way they needed to move forward. But I found myself saying a lot, my head knows, my heart just needs to catch up. So I've really tried to give myself grace in those arenas and just allow my heart to catch up in its own time. And maybe that was the decision I made, that I would just let things happen organically and move forward in that manner. So I'm sorry if that was a little bit of a heavy topic today. As you can hear, continues to be filled with emotion for me. It's still pretty raw. It's still pretty new. But again, I'm so fortunate that both of those men are still in my life and can listen to me talk about these things and understand where I'm coming from and the purpose they served. So to all of my listeners out there, thanks for joining me today. If you're ready to realize your wildest dreams, come and join us in the Wildly Courageous Women Facebook group, where we're changing people's lives one brave decision at a time. I'm Dana Peever. Until next time, make great decisions and do life fun.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Wildly Courageous Women. Keep listening to hear more stories of these incredible women realizing their wildest dreams. If you have a story to tell about a decision that you've made that has impacted your life, I'd love to feature you as a guest. Please get in touch and don't forget to grab my latest gift by clicking below. I'm Dana Peever. As always, make great decisions and do life fun.